Today's session is all about Microsoft Excel tips and keyboard shortcuts, how they can help you save time and improve your spreadsheet skills. We're fortunate to have Bob Furman, our, our Bridgepoint Technologies Director of Service Delivery, who is an expert in this field, and he's going to lead us through today's discussion. I get to work with Bob every day, and I can tell you, we'll be in the middle of working on a spreadsheet over a Teams chat or a Zoom call, and he'll be sharing tips with me on the fly. He really knows this stuff, so going to share some great information with us. So without further ado, let me introduce Bob, and thank you once again for being with us today.
Thanks, Rich, and thanks everybody for joining. So to set the expectation on mastering, right? So it's really what I call a journey. There's so much to it. It's a beast. It's very powerful. To set the expectation for today, if you joined as you think you're an intermediate or expert, I'm still hoping to maybe touch on something you have not seen or been exposed to, because there are so many facets to Excel. There's no way in 45 minutes or 60 minutes with Q&A to touch on everything, obviously. But my goal is, be it you're a beginner, intermediate, advanced, that hopefully I will touch on something that you haven't considered before, that will bring efficiency to as you work with Excel. There's always something new to learn. I always say, if anybody says they're a true expert in IT, they're probably lying, because it changed 30 seconds ago, because the technology changes so quickly. These slides, I'm not going to do death by PowerPoint and read everything. I'm just going to expose what I hope to touch on in this when I get over to Excel to do like a live, demonstration of these features. Starts easy, right? Shortcuts on your keyboard. Even though it seems lifting your hand from your mouse, you save time if you just can learn some repeatable, frequently used features. You do it with the keyboard. You're not moving your hand off your keyboard. That little thing makes you a little more efficient. And even some of these, if I go back, translate over to Word, Control B for bold, Control I for italicize, Control U underline. Some of these actually transpose over, and like Control Copy Paste, insert, those transfer over to other Windows applications or Microsoft applications. There's many ways to skin a cat with Excel and even in Word. So I'm going to show differences of those just to show an example of your brain may remember how to do it better that way, to do like autofill compared to a flash fill, compared to formulas. Other tricks, Format Painter, I know is one Rich mentioned. I showed him and he's like, oh my gosh, that's going to save me so much time. It's a simple little thing. That also is in Word. Conditional formatting is more for highlighting data that you want to pop out and do a report to someone, be it an executive or a client. Formulas and functions, there's a ton of them. I'm going to touch on some of them. And by the way, don't judge me. I may call this an advanced formula. You may call it a beginner, because you're a CFO and you use it all the time. Again, I'm just trying to show cool things for whatever level of experience you may have with Excel. Formatting, to me, I come out of a law firm environment where attorneys love to kill trees. They printed everything. So that's why I'll show a macro how to make everything auto fit, go to landscape, do grid lines and stuff. But macros and format can be used for formatting and everything else. I'm going to touch on macros. Data protection is important. It's a built-in feature to every Microsoft app. I will show you in the middle of my demonstration how to save an Excel file and putting a customized password on it. What that does is it uses your password to then come up with an algorithm to randomly encrypt the bits and the bytes in the Excel file, so that if you put it on a USB key and you dropped it somewhere in the hotel and somebody got it, they will see the file name, but they will not be able to open it because they won't have your password. And brute force hacking, it's difficult now with the level of encryption that Microsoft provides, so that's important. But then pivot tables, some will call it intermediate. I'll say it's a little more expert to use every aspect of a pivot table. Because you're going to see a simple pivot table today, but there are so many things you can do with pivot tables. Charts are impactful, right? You put pie charts, bar charts. Sometimes it really helps highlight what you're trying to demonstrate. You can even do interactive. I will not have the time for that today, I don't think, unless I go very quickly, because I do talk quickly. But there's just dipping your toe in the pool of charts. You can go really sophisticated with it. Macros, again, a repeatable task. I use it a lot for cleaning up data that I may extract a report for a client, be it the Microsoft 365 licensing. It comes down as a CSV, which is a comma separated value file. I have a button I can click. It deletes the columns I don't want, sorts it, deletes any user that doesn't have a license, etc. So macros are powerful. To make them even more powerful, because I'm just going to show you how to record one. To make it more powerful, if you wanted, you could start learning VBA, which is Visual Basic. That's the coding language that the macro uses. That would be a 3-week course by itself, probably. The other thing that's really neat with Excel, they make it very, very easy to go out and get data from different sources. You could have a SQL database on a server with your CRM system, with your client matter names, your contact names, your sales, channel names or company names. You could have a CSV file. You could have another Excel file. You can have all these different data sets, and you can make one Excel with a pivot table otherwise to go out and snag just pieces of information you want specifically to compile it into one place. That's also very powerful. So we'll get right over to my dummy Excel file. And again, don't judge me, but I just pulled over some, dummy data. I just found a large data set on the web of first name, last names, and then kind of tweaked it from there. So I had some data to work with. So keyboard shortcuts, I'll zoom a little on this. I'm not going through each one of these. I just pulled down what I call the common ones. If you use bold a lot, if you notice when I go up and I do what I call float, which means I put the cursor on an item and I don't click, it pops up and says, hey, this is a bold button. But in parentheses, it's showing me the keyboard shortcut. So if you're using bold a lot and you forget, you can just float on it. Now, not all of them will probably have a keyboard shortcut because they're special features, they're unique, or for whatever reason, Microsoft didn't create a keyboard shortcut. So if you float on it and there isn't one, in parentheses, that usually means there is not a keyboard shortcut. So you just kind of float on them and it'll start telling you. Now, some of these, like cut selection, you already know, Control X CV, those are common. So there's dozens of keyboard shortcuts in Excel, and some are absolutely specific. And at the end of this, we'll talk about some resources we can provide for anyone interested that will give you access to links to go to Microsoft's website to quickly find all those. So now let's look at a formula fill. So I have first name, last name, but for whatever reason, I need to bring those two together. But my data was presented to me separately. So a simple formula to start any formula, again, this is what I call basic. You start with an equal sign. As soon as you do equals, Excel is listening. It's saying, well, okay, here we go. This person wants to do a formula. Well, what do I want to do? Well, I want to merge the two fields together. I'm on my keyboard. I'm just going to left arrow over to first name. My goal here is to get first name, space, last name. So I left arrow over. Notice it says A2. It's following along with my mouse clicks, by the way, or arrow. You can use either one on your keyboard. And it says A2. Okay, I got my first one. Well, what do I want to do now? I want to append. I want to add a space, append. So what that means is it's end, the ampersand sign. That's what you use in Excel. Well, what do I want to add a space? Well, I got to put it in, it's a text. A space is still text. I got to do quote, space, quote. And then I want to add ampersand, left arrow, last name. And notice how it's still highlighting the column A. When I'm complete with whatever formula it is, simply hit enter. So now I have first name, last. When I go back up and touch it, you will see in the formula bar what the cell, and these are called rows, columns, and cells. The cell is the result of a formula, A2 plus space plus B2. Very simple, right? Now, let's say I want to populate that down to the end of my list of Control End, by the way, is a keyboard shortcut, 4,096 rows. You're obviously not going to type that 4,000 times. Now, this is one of the ways it's different on how you do things. I can do a formula fill by just double clicking in the bottom right. Notice how there's a little black box there. It's probably hard to see. But in the bottom cell, when it's highlighted, there's a little black box. If I double click on that, Excel is smart enough that it just populated all 4,000 rows with first, space, last in seconds. So that's a simple thing. It's very powerful. I'm going to jump around a little bit. I probably won't follow my notes because there's a lot to cover. But these are now formulas. So maybe when I copy and paste this into Word, it'll go as text. But sometimes you want, even in Excel, you no longer want the underlying formula. You want to convert it back to a result, a static result, so that the formula isn't following this data along. Usually in Excel, you do want formulas to stay, but let's just say for text, you don't. I can highlight these. I can do right-click copy, and I'm going to paste right back on top of it as what they call paste special. And some of these paste options are common ones are here. But if you kick it out for paste special, you're going to see, unlike Word, Excel gives you all these other options. And what I want to do is just say paste value. And what that means is I'm going to convert the formula to the result. So now notice when I touch these cells up in the formula bar, it's the actual text until I go below. Now there's my formula. Sometimes that's useful, so I want to point out paste special. In Word, by the way, paste special is nice because it pastes just text. It takes away the italicized, underlining, bolding, font size. If you do paste special, it just takes the standard text. So now if I go over to what's called a flash fill, well, over here, I added a column called employee number. I just, populated it using Excel with a unique number. So we're going to pretend it's an HR list, and I've got first, last, and employee separated. I want to bring them all together. These I typed manually. I did not use a formula. I typed 2 of them. Now that Excel is kind of like AI in a sense, it's watching me and it's studying my behavior. I'm going to do flash fill, which also is up under data, but I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut Control E and watch what happens. It automatically populated it as text, not a formula. So that's what I mean about different ways to skin a cat. You can do a formula, copy paste special, or if there's a pattern where you're bringing things to the left, that's flash fill does look to the left. You can just do Control E and same thing, it did all 4,000 rows almost instantaneously. So that too is a pretty cool feature. So now we jump over to formatting. So I brought some of the data over, so I have information to work with, and I'm going to follow my notes here. So I want to merge an initial cap, the names, into full name, because for whatever reason, the export from some other computer system, it dealt in all lowercase. So I can do equals proper. And notice when I start typing a formula name as well, it starts giving me hints of what I'm looking for. And there's, I don't know about thousands, but there's at least hundreds of formulas. That's why I'm mastering it. There's something out there. And even learning the syntax of some formulas will take a half an hour when you start learning these, like VLOOKUP, which we may touch on. So I do equals proper, and it even says converts a text string group, and I do parentheses and says, well, what text? Well, I want first name. Then I close parentheses. Remember the trick, ampersand, I want to add what? Space. And then I want to add proper of the last name. So now I have first name, last name in initial cap, double click. I've got now everybody's names. Another useful trick I didn't put in my notes. Notice that my text now is overrunning my column width. If you come up top between any 2 columns or any 2 rows, it's usually columns, notice my cursor changes to what I call a sizing arrow. If I just double click, it'll auto snap to auto fit. So you don't have to manually drag it. You can just double click. And even a better trick is if you have a bunch of columns that aren't looking right, to the left of A and above 1 is this little square that highlights the entire sheet. If I now double click in between any column, it'll auto snap every column. If I double click between rows, if they happen to be multiple rows, it would also snap the row. Another cool little formatting saving time trick. All right, so I did that one. Autofill, double click and drag. I already showed that. I double clicked in the bottom right. It populated that same formula all the way down, populated that. So that I touched on. Paste special, I already touched on from the previous one. That's where I want to convert formulas back to text. I do copy. Paste special, which is if I float, tells me it's the value. That's what I want. Now I no longer have formula in the bar. Format painter. Let's say I want all the B names to be bold, blue for B, and I want it to be a larger font for whatever reason. So, well, then somebody comes back and says, well, I also want all the C's. So format painter is you touch something that you want to replicate in terms of formatting. And that's for the example I'm doing, bold, larger font, and blue. So if you come up top here, and depending on your size of your screen, by the way, you may not see format painter spelled out. You may just see the brush. It depends on the size of your dimensions of your screen, but you'll at least see the paintbrush, but it'll say format painter when you float on it. So again, the important thing is you're touching what you want to replicate, hit format painter. I'm going to click and drag on E. and it quickly matches that formatting. So Format Painter and Word, that's in Word, by the way, as well as Excel. Very time-saving trick. Then you have character count. Let's say for whatever reason you want to know how many characters are in the name. You would do length, start with the formula, touch the full name, close it, and it tells me there's 10 characters. Double click in the bottom right corner. I now know the character names of all my people. And again, this is a silly example, but it's the formulas that are important. So VLOOKUP. So on this sheet that I got from ADP, HR, whatever, all I got was employee information. Well, then from the benefits people, I got a second data sort. So this would be an example where I was talking earlier, I have an Excel from HR and I have an Excel from the benefits folks for payroll and insurance or something. So I've been tasked with informing all my employees about their insurance options, and some of it might be contingent on the number of kids they have or what they would have to pay, right? The co-pays or whatnot might be dependent on children. So you were provided this information. Well, I have the employee email over here, and I have the employee email over here. So I do have a way to match, but over here, I do not have first name, last name. The only thing that I'll call unique in data world, we call it UNOs, usually for unique number. But an UNO is a unique thing that isn't necessarily replicated. It's called a one-to-one relationship. So I know I can match on email to bring over then from here the number of children. If I did that manually, I'm probably going to make a mistake. Garbage in, garbage out. I always say every time you got to retype something, there's opportunity for error. You should try to automate those processes. So Excel makes that pretty easy on these. And this is a very common one. There are other ones. There's HLOOKUP, XLOOKUP, but VLOOKUP is the one I use a lot. So V is for vertical. So I'm saying VLOOKUP. I can type. And notice it's populating the formula for me already. Maybe hard to read. I'll read it for you. It says, looks for a value in the leftmost column of the table and then returns a value in the same row from a column you specify. What does that mean? That's what I talk about. It could take 20 minutes to go Google this to figure it out. So I'm going to say parenthesis. Now it says, well, what's my lookup value? We're already determined it's that email. So I just left arrow. So it says, I'm going to look up the value from E2. I'm going to hit comma because I'm going to step 2. Notice it highlighted in bold the table array. Well, again, this is technical talk, but you'll learn over time. What that means is, where's data source number 2? Well, data source for me is I'm going to switch over to my other tab, and I'm going to say it's the email column, but I want the result of the number of children. So I'm going to highlight both. That's what makes it an array. I have multiple columns and rows. When I highlight the array, I hit column or comma. Now it says, okay, if I get a hit, what do you want to return? They call it column index number. Again, techie talk, but it really means I've highlighted 2 columns. If I match in column 1, what do I want to bring over? I want to bring over column 2. Then I do comma, range lookup. I'm not going to get into it, but I'm saying false. That makes it say it's got to be a perfect match. So I know for beginners that might seem like a lot, but I want to excite you about VLOOKUP. Please go Google it. And again, we'll give you resources. But VLOOKUP is incredibly powerful. It saves not only time, but it saves you from re-entry and possible making errors. So imagine if you did this manually and you wrote down 2 kids instead of 4. You're going to have unhappy employees, obviously. So very powerful thing to do is to learn how to do a VLOOKUP. And again, this is not to make anybody a master at the end of this 40 minutes. This is just to point you in the right direction so you can go empower yourself with what you need. So now I've demonstrated the VLOOKUP. Simple conditional formatting. So I'm going to use an example of the first name begins with a letter lower than C. So if I come over here to the first name, and I have a big button, yours may look different depending on your size, but you're looking for conditional formatting. And by the way, I should make assumptions. If you haven't used Microsoft applications a lot, these are drop-down menus up top. Underneath it is what we call a ribbon, and the ribbon is carved out into sections. In this example, it's clipboard, font, alignment, number. So as I select a drop-down or type, I get different ribbons. but this one is on the home tab. It gets confusing even for me. I've using it for 30 years. Some stuff's under data. Some stuff is so popular, they put it on the home screen. But I'm looking for conditional formatting. I'm going to do a very simple one, but this one too, like pivot tables, is pretty cool. I want to say I want to highlight cells for a value that's less than, because my target is less than C. So I'm going to say highlight anything that's less than C in red. And you can see it's already doing that. It treats blanks as less than as well because it's blank. But conditional formatting will highlight it. The example we're using right now for our customers is we present them a list of managed devices that we manage and supervise and do patch management and everything on. If Windows 10 highlight in red, and we give that report to our client, because by October 14th of this year, if you're not aware, you got to be on Windows 11. Windows 10 will no longer be supported in October. So it's a very easy way for our account management team to use conditional formatting and automatically highlights any device that's running Windows 10. So that's a real life example you can use all the time. And again, it's very powerful, and you can even do formulas, which I'm going to show here. So now I want to say the first and last. So I'm going to look at the full name. I'm going to say first and last, if it's lower than C on both of those. Let's see if I can pull this off. So I'm doing left of A1. I'll check my formula again. Yeah, looking at A and B. So this time I'm going to say new rule. So I can do formula. Paste did not work, and it's not going to let me go back, is it? Nope, 1 second. That failed on me, and I'm not going to waste time on it. It's a copy paste. It's bringing it as a character, but you can do advanced conditional formatting with formulas. I tried to make it easy, but it's not coming over properly, where you can say if A is this and C is that. It doesn't even have to be in the same cell, where you can start popping stuff out so that it's easy to see, like a Windows 10 machine. Fixed reference formula. So I'm now going to switch over to doing a salary. So let's say that your firm has decided, because of budget or other reasons, you're going to give everyone a 3.5% raise, and you want to see what that would look like, because you think 3.5 will work, but you want to calculate it to see really what that would look like for you for your next year's budget. So I have everyone's current salary. So I've just got these numbers from, payroll, HR, whoever. But now I want to do an adjusted salary on a 3.5% raise. So if I did this first person, I would say, if you notice the formula, it says equals I2, which is their current salary, times parenthesis 1 for 100% plus the raise of 3.5. So it's basically taking the salary times, 1.035, and it gets me this result. Now, this is where you want to be careful with autofill. By double clicking, it just gave me a bunch of numbers. And if I didn't pay attention, I would think I'm done, and I would go report this number with an auto sum feature. I would go say, oh, the load on payroll would be this number. Well, what would happen, unfortunately, is you notice these are all the same. And the reason is, if you look at the formula, it says I8 times 1 plus K8. K8 is blank. So you don't need to bring 3.5% down if you're doing a fixed raise. What you would do when you create the formula is, instead you would say, let me take that back out and do it from scratch. You would say, I want to take this times parenthesis 1 plus that number. There's different ways to do it, but to do it from the keyboard, it's just F4. Now notice up top in my formula bar where it says K2, by pressing F4, it add $K, $2. I close it with the parenthesis. What dollar signs do is it makes it a locked reference. So now it's going to lock to K2, but the I2 will move. Now when I double click, notice my number is bigger by 3.5% for everyone. So you do want to be careful based on your formulas when you do that double click autofill to make sure it's giving you the result you needed, or else it's back to garbage in, garbage out. And now obviously this number will be much bigger than the last one. So that's, fixed reference F4 is a nice little trick. You can do it manually too, with just manually clicking in the formula bar. And then you could type $, $. Formatting dates and numbers. Higher date, notice I've got a variety of formats here. It doesn't look clean. So you can highlight a column or a cell, right click, format cells. There's a lot of options in here compared to Word and text, right? So I want currency. It defaults to 2, but if you only wanted 1 or 0, you could change that. It doesn't change the number, it just changed the display, but I'll leave it at the default of, and I did currency, right? Garbage in, garbage out. Notice it converted to a serialized date. So we can fix that very easily by going to date. Within date, I got a lot of options. Do I want time with the date or just the date? In this case, I just want the date and make it look cleaner. So you can quickly format dates with different ways. And if it's a date and time, you could say just display the time. You have all kinds of options. Well, now salary and adjusted salary. You can click, for data, or there's buttons up here. You can quickly make it a, currency and whatnot, or you highlight it, right click, format cells. What do I want to format it as? Currency with 2 decimals. And there it's already fixed my formula. So it looks a little cleaner. So that's just, changing dates, text even, you can do different things. But formatting cells is kind of powerful too. Auto sum I already demonstrated. I'll do it again. At the bottom of a column, if you hit auto sum, again, you think it's a data field, but it's on the home because they consider it common. Auto sum, it will, before it accepts it and enters it, it's showing it to you to make sure you're okay. And might be hard to see again in your screen, but it's saying it's the sum, parenthesis, J2 colon through J29. Colons means a range in Excel language. So I look at it, I said, yeah, well, why isn't it J1? Well, J1 was my header. It knew not to bring in my header. So it's smart enough usually that AutoSum is going to AutoSum above it. Sometimes if you do AutoSum here, it's going to be smart and try to AutoSum the rows. But notice here, it just stopped at money. If I also wanted to go farther, I'd have to modify that formula. So that's the AutoSum. Average. Now let's say I want to look at average salary. This again is pretty basic. Intermediate equals average. Again, if I can type with my bad eyes. So average is there. Notice there's average A, average if, average ifs, and then D average. So statisticians can tell you the rest. I'm going to hit the bottom of my range. I'm going to hit colon on my keyboard, and now I can arrow or page up if there's a lot. If you had thousands of row, you would not page up or arrow. You would just type I2, right, to get it. But you can manually highlight or drag your mouse. So now I know the average salary across my employee base is, 58,000. Text after. This wasn't always in Excel. I don't know when it exactly got added, but oh my gosh, is it a time saver for people like me that have to sometimes manipulate data and extract it to look for, let's say, email whitelisting. I'm not going to whitelist, gmail.com, but I might whitelist mybridgepoint.com or company I do business with.com. So I don't want everybody's full email because it's harder for me to see common domains. So I'm just trying to give you a real life example again, but this text after is valuable. So I want to extract just what's called the top level domain from the email. I would do equals to start a formula, text after, and it's telling me I haven't mistyped it because it says text after, return text that's after delimiting character. Delimiting is a comma, a tab, or other things. So then I'm going to say parenthesis. Well, what text do I want to analyze? I can arrow over or click with my mouse. I want to look at the email. I hit comma to move to the next step, and it says, well, what's the delimiter? Again, it's text, so I'm putting it in quotes, @, close parenthesis, enter. So now I've extracted gmail.com from that employee's email address. I double-clicked autofill. Now I have it all. So text after, and if you haven't already figured it out, there's also text before. So if I just wanted to take the front end of it for some reason, I would say text before @. Remove duplicates. I'll do now. I'm going to step out of line a little. So now I just want to know for whitelisting all the unique personal email accounts of my employees. I'm going to copy it. And again, I'm sure Excel masters will tell me there's better ways to do this, but I'm going to paste special to bring over all my domains. I've got them highlighted. I'm going to go to data, big button up here, remove duplicates. Do I have a header? No, so I don't check it. It just says everything in column A, go remove duplicates. I've now limited it very quickly to these are the 4 domains that my employees are using that I would have to consider for whitelisting in this example. So that's a pretty cool, powerful feature because it does it so quickly. Count if. So again, these are silly, but trying to make it real life. I want to find employees with more than 2 children because they're going to go on a different insurance premium. And I need to, properly communicate to them how much their insurance copay may be. So I put the formula here. Hopefully it'll work this time. It says equals count if, and it's exactly that. If the text I tell it to look at has a number greater than 2, then count it. So I'm going to copy that down under to, let me do it. Type it. Oh. So I did, and now it's up in the formula bar, count if the range F2 through F29, which is my number of children, if it's greater than 2 children, meaning 3 or higher, how many do I have? I have 20 out of my 28. So that quickly tells me an answer that otherwise I'd be going, 1, 2, 3, etc. Possible for error. So let the technology give you the proper answer. So count if, it's pretty simple to use. You can go nuts with it, and you can do embedded ifs too. You can do if this, if that, and then if this is true and this is true, then do that. If not, do this. You can do embedded if statements. You got to be careful with that. Excel's usually pretty good. It's not going to give you a wrong answer if you're way off. It's going to say you don't have enough parentheses, or your formula is not making any sense. You'll get a pop-up error. But when you get that complicated, you obviously do spot check it before you do a flash fill or a autofill. So macro example, I'm going to switch over to this one for now. So I'm going to make this kind of ugly. I'm going to turn off my bullets or my bold and underlining. So I've got this raw data, and it's data I get a lot, be it from payroll, and I got to count children or whatever I'm doing for insurance benefits. So I have this data that somebody just dumps on me in raw format, CSV or unformatted text. So I'm gonna use how to make a macro for formatting. Again, macros can be used for anything, but you got to be careful with it that it only is going to be really powerful if it's following the same sets and layouts. But for formatting, it's going to work. So to do that, it goes to view what. It's kind of, it used to be under tools, but they moved it. This doesn't make sense to me, but I just know where it lives now. So you're going to go to view, macros, and I'm going to click record macro. As soon as I do that, it pops up and says, well, what do I want to call it? I'm going to call it Bob format. You can name it whatever you want. If you try to start with a number or an underscore, I think it'll yell at you. It wants text, but it will tell you. And by the way, if you don't have a personal macro workbook turned on in Excel, you may can't record or something. Again, Google is your friend. It's just go figure out how to allow personal macros. So I'm going to record a macro. I'm going to call it Bob format. I hit OK. Nothing happens. It's just sitting here. So I wish it was like Zoom or Teams where you got a record light or something, so it says, you're being recorded. So all I did is it's now waiting for me to do something. And it's going to record that, and it's going to record my actions in VBA, Visual Basic. So I'm going to highlight the whole sheet with that little trick I taught you to the top left. I'm going to double click the format. I'm going to highlight my first row. I'm going quickly because I got more to cover here and I don't want to run out of time. Bold and underline. I could say, I want this in green. Everything I'm doing right now, I'm going to do format, painter to put this back to bold and underline. And I'm going to say, I don't want 2 decimals. I'm going to come up to page layout. And again, remember, it's remembering everything I do. Fit to, by the way, is pretty powerful. So I'm going to fit my sheet. I'm going to make it landscape, so it's wider. I'm going to fit it to one wide, but it may be 999 pages long. Just the number I always put in there. My margins I could adjust down to whatever I want, 0.5. So I pick that. I want to center it horizontally. Do I want a header and footer? Yes. I want my tab name. These are tabs at the bottom. What's my footer, confidential date, etc. And then on my sheet, I do want grid lines. And do I want to repeat anything, either rows or columns? If it goes more than one sheet, I'm going to say, yeah, rows at top. I want it to be row 1. And I hit OK. Come back to view, macros. Notice it says stop. I hit stop. Now it's done. So I could repeat that with the same, ooh, look out. Let me undo that. I could repeat that now. I'm just going to undo some of it manually so you see it work. So I get that data set next payroll period, and I want to clean it up again. I would come in and do view macros. What do I have available? And somewhere in here, I have Bob format that I just created, and I run it. And within seconds, it repeats all those recordings. I'm not going to show you, but there's a Visual Basic Editor. You could go look at it, and that's how you can self-teach yourself. How does Visual Basic do green font? I could go find that by looking at it. So you're plagiarizing your own recording, so to speak. So learning VBA for repetitive tasks is massive. It's such a time saver. I used to pull down QBR reports for our clients. It would take me hours. Now with all my automation in Excel, I can do it in probably a half an hour. It's a lot of data that I just pull it in, I hit a button and it formats it so it's clean and sharp and only presents the information needed for your client or your executive team or whoever else. So that was my macro. Saving with password. Okay, well, I've got this document now that I want to throw around, but I've got very sensitive information in it, right? So this is in Microsoft apps, Excel, Word, etc. It's strange to me, but I find a lot of people don't do this. And it's such a simple thing to do. And it may be, one, they're not aware they can do it, or it could be two, well, if I do this and I forget my password, I'm gonna lose my data. That's a legitimate concern. Like I said earlier, you can't brute force these, and there's no hacking tool anymore. There used to be, but I am not familiar with the tool that exists today that can break into a modern Excel password. Oh, one other thing I'm going to show. This is a workbook with sheets. So picture a manila folder with a bunch of different things in it that are stapled or paper clipped. Well, I want to pull something out of that. They don't get the whole folder because it's very confidential or whatever reason. They just want one piece of paper in it. So I'm going to do right click, move or copy on this sheet, this pivot table. I'm going to move or copy. I'm going to create a copy to a new book. So notice there's nothing here. I'm going to say create a copy. So it's making a copy, pulling it out. And now you see I only have one worksheet. Up top, it says book 3 because it's the third file in Excel I've opened today. I'm going to do file save as, and I got to get outside the default save to by clicking browse. Your machine might look a little differently depending on your integrations. When you get to this file explorer type look and feel, I'm just going to save it in my documents and I'll call it, demo password. It's as easy as going to tools, general options. And again, there'll be a recording of this, but I'm moving quickly because I'm already at 40 minutes in. So you're going to hit general options. I wish it said encrypt with password or something, but it's under general. So general is the password. So I'm going to say password to open, and then you also have a password to modify. So if you're an attorney and you're doing discovery presentation, electronic discovery, and you're producing it, you could put a password to open because it's got sensitive information, and you could say a different password to modify. So all they can do is view it. They would have to try to copy paste it to do formulas. They can't change what you produce to them. You kind of lock it down so they can view it but not edit it. And you can even do read-only recommended. Again, Google general options, Excel file general options to read up on all the specifics. But now if I put, doesn't even matter because I'm never going to open again. Well, that's going to make me retype it though, actually. This is a password. I think I typed it right. You hit OK. It says prove you didn't type it wrong. And now my demo password file is saved with the password. If somebody goes to open it, they're going to get a pop-up that says enter password. If they don't know it, they don't get to see it. So saving with a password is important as well. So pivot tables now is some, if they're CFOs, CPAs, are probably going to say this is intermediate. But for most folks I run across, they would consider this mind-blowing. And again, I'm just going to do a quick, simple one because I'm running out of time. Again, this was to expose you to the semantics, the terminology that you can use to go Google and find stuff. And I'm going to talk about online training too before we drop. So let's say I have, hire date, salary, adjusted salary, number of children, and I want to do a pivot table to work off of this information here. So if I highlight it, I go to insert, and again, my instinct is always, well, I'm about to do a data table, pivot table, it's data. It's under insert. These are things you're going to learn. And I'm going to insert pivot table. And these little arrows, by the way, that exist means if you kick it out, you're going to get more options. But you can just, for the general, most of the time, you can just hit pivot table, the button itself. Now, since I highlighted data, it's already said the table range. And notice it says new worksheet. That's the default. I could say existing, so it would stick to this one, but I am going to make a new worksheet. Again, these tabs at the bottom are worksheets. And I hit OK. Well, gee, that's real useful. Nothing happened. Well, it's a template. So now, based on the fields I had highlighted in my table set, I can start bringing stuff down. So I'm going to look for a value of number of children. And for value, and in rows, I'm going to put, actually, I'm going to have it backwards. So I did it wrong, but it's cool because you click, and I'm going to go move to row, and I'm going to do adjusted salary to value. So now I brought over into my pivot table the adjusted salary. It says sum. Well, I don't want sum. I'm trying to determine the average. Am I being a good person? Or if you're doing this, like, well, if they have more children, maybe I should pay them a little more, if that's your mentality. The default when I brought it into values is it does do sum. So keep that in mind, and it's telling you right there. I don't want sum, I want average. It's this easy to switch. Value field settings, when I click on it. I don't want sum, I want average. Now converted to average of. So am I paying people with 5 children more? Gosh, I'm not. For whatever reason, somebody with 1 child, I'm paying more, right? So again, this is a silly example, but it's just trying to turn it into a real world example. So not only that, once you have the pivot table, you can come to the drop-down arrow and say, well, I don't want to look at everyone. I just want to look at people with a lot of kids. So you can filter the pivot table down to what you want. So there's a lot of cool things, and you can bring in more than, one field or count, row. You can do all kinds of, so I can break it out by hire date, number of children. Now it's showing by hire date. You could do tenure. So while they're making more money, even though they have fewer kids, they're making more money because they've been here for 10 years. They got raises every year. So it is kind of very powerful, and you can do charts, you can do all kinds of stuff. Let's say, again, I want to do children and salary, and you can do insert. Oh, that's a recommended pivot table. You can do pivot table charts as well to say you want it to start digesting it. So I could say salary, number of children, and it's going to start making charts for you. And same thing, if I come over here, because it's dynamic, I can say I only want to see what it's like with people with low, and it updates the chart instantaneously because it's a live look back to your pivot table data, wherever it went. It's constantly looking over here. So if I start changing numbers here, it's going to impact that chart automatically. So pivot tables is 3-week dedicated course to just even be close to being an expert. I would never say master, but it's a lot of information and a lot of different ways. The other thing that I'm not even touching on is they even have like a power pivot table, which is the green button. Where do they hide it? It's this guy here. They call it data model now, but it used to be called power pivot. This guy is pivot tables and steroids, kind of. It gives you more flexibility and power in there as well. So that was my quick little dog and pony show, whipping through a lot. Again, I talk fast, I move fast, to respect everyone's time. So if you need the recording, we can provide that to you. But there are resources. This was one example I pulled, screenshots of somebody. They give you like all the level 1 courses, which I broke out here, you can take for free. Then as you move up, they start going to premium, right? Because they're giving you a little taste before they, trying to get you to pay. But if I may switch to my browser, bring that down to the right window.
Yeah, Bob, there is a question in the Q&A as well, if you have time for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we got 10 minutes yet, right? So I'll whip through this. So this is, and these you can get from us. I got all these links in a PDF or Word document we can get to you. So Excel itself has free videos. They even have a template. I highly recommend make your first pivot table. They give you an Excel file, and in the Excel file, it's like a wizard. It steps you through what I kind of just showed you. So that's where you would, if you've never done it before, start easy. But this one was pretty simple, pretty easy to use. But they have all kinds of other stuff out here. You can register. This one is called My Online Training Hub. That's the one I showed the screenshots of. It's free for intro. The higher ones you'd have to pay for. And I'm not supporting these guys or saying what the content is like. I'm just giving you ideas. This is Coursera. They say enroll for free. I've not done it, but I was trying to find you folks free resources because I'm hoping you found something that's tweaked your curiosity or got you a little excited to learn more. There are a ton of free resources out there. You can go to YouTube. Just start Googling in YouTube, Excel something. And like, that's where the syntax helps. Like Excel VLOOKUP, you're going to more quicker get to your result. But like even the hashtag stuff, I started watching this. I'm like, wow, there's stuff I've never touched on. This is the lady. That's why I liked her free online YouTube. That's how I found her here. My online was actually watching her YouTube stuff. She's got some stuff out there that's for free too, broken down. Like this is the power pivot table. So, and she even gives you a file that you can download and use on personal. I couldn't display it because she had a copyright on it, and I wanted to respect that, so I didn't display it. But this person specifically, I was pretty impressed with. All right, that's all I got.
So there is one question in the Q&A. Before we get into the Q&A, if I could ask everybody, we enabled the chat button at the bottom of Zoom. If you could please go into the chat and type in your name. For some reason, we're having a issue with our Zoom account right now, and it's showing all of the participants as the same person's name, which we know is not true. So if you could take a minute, click the chat button at the bottom of your screen.
You want name and or email, just in case they want resources, links and stuff, or just name?
Just name is fine.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So the question, Bob, that someone had put in the Q&A window is, when you do password protect a worksheet or an entire workbook, how do you remember those passwords for the future?
Yeah, I did touch on that, right? So let me close out of this guy. Just kicked Excel off my screen. Yeah, I mean, it's a catch-22. You want to protect it, but you don't want to double password. So this is what it would look like, by the way, when I go to open it. So if I just slap at it and I don't know it, I'm not getting in, right? So that is the danger of not knowing the password. So if you're familiar with Chrome, which most people use, or Edge or Firefox, if you go to Amazon Prime for the first time or any other online account that you got to log in with, after you type your name and your creds, it says, do you want me to save this password? I'm going to tell you right now, as a cyber guy and an IT guy, in Google Chrome, absolutely not. You should not do that. Here's the reason why, and then I'll get back to the underlying question. Chrome now allows the user / a hacker that got on a user's computer The ability to export all stored passwords in plain text, not encrypted, not with a password. The browser has a built-in function. If you go to settings, passwords, password manager, export my passwords, it'll warn you, hey, be careful where you save this file because all your passwords are going to be in plain text. So if a hacker happened to got a foothold on your computer, they could steal your passwords out of Chrome. So we recommend using password managers. There are free ones out there, LastPass, there's a bunch of others, and you pick your poison, but they have a master password on the vault that then stores all your passwords. Now, getting back to your question, you can manually add other passwords to your password vault. It doesn't have to be a browser website. And if the solution you picked required a website name, just call it excelfileforbob.com, whatever you would remember to search for in your vault. And then you could save this as a password, for that Excel file. That's one way to do it to keep you secure. But hackers are very sophisticated, so you do have to be careful. But we don't want password management to be so difficult that people don't do it or use the same password, by the way. Don't ever use Sunflower One on an Excel file, your Gmail, your work email, your Amazon Prime account, your LinkedIn account. You have to use different passwords everywhere. I know it's frustrating. I've seen people, we call it the keyboard test. They put their passwords on a post-it on their keyboard. I was helping a woman from my neighborhood. She pulled a book out of her purse and started flipping through all her passwords right in front of me. Those are big no-nos. You can't be writing them down anywhere. You just can't. It's got to be saved and encrypted. There are tricks you can use for passphrases that are long, are as solid anymore as using numbers and special characters. An example would be Excel is a gray elephant, apple. That's a phrase that maybe makes sense to me that I can remember. And that's very long, and it didn't have a number or a special character. Those are hard to break for hackers. So do mnemonic tricks without telling anybody. Don't ever use your children's name, your pets' names, or anything else. I mean, I could do a whole hour just on password management, but just use complicated passwords by numbers, characters, and/or length. Don't repeat them, and find a password vault methodology that works for you. By the way, if you don't want to use a password vault, even if it's free and it's convenient and it plugs into your browser, so it makes it very easy, you can actually, some people I've taught to use Excel as their password vault manager. So in my example, that file would be Amazon Prime. This is my login ID and my password, and it's always unique. Then you've got LinkedIn, your login and a unique password. And you can list all your online accounts in there, your banks and everything else. And it has your passwords or hints to your passwords if you're really nervous, like stuff that makes sense to you. Then you absolutely put a unique password on an Excel file. Then you only need to remember that one password, the password on your Excel file that has all your passwords. I would do that at a minimum. Otherwise, you can investigate. Just Google. I always say Google's your friend. Password vault managers, and most are going to be free on one device. If you want it on your phone, a laptop, a desktop, and a work laptop, then it may be a subscription-based one.
Perfect. All right, there's about 5 minutes remaining. If anybody has any additional questions, now's your chance. I'm just looking through the chat to make sure there weren't any questions that got entered in there. But thank you everyone for entering your actual names instead of the name that was showing up. And I noticed that Violet put a message in that you will receive a link to this recording and to the resource sheets that Bob discussed. We will email that to you tomorrow after we upload the webinar to our website. So thank you, everybody. That brings us to the end of today's webinar. As a reminder, we will be having future webinars. Our next one is scheduled for March 27th. And the topic of that webinar is going to be how to use tools like ChatGPT and Grok 3 and others that you may have heard of to increase your efficiency. Bridgepoint social media posts and emails will announce the registration details for that session, but it will be on March 27th. And once again, we thank you for joining us. We have about 20 years of experience helping organizations improve cybersecurity, IT support, and technology strategy. I know a lot of you are already current clients of ours. We're always looking to be referred to people you may know who could use our help. And if we're not your current IT provider, please reach out if you have any additional topics that you need assistance with. Thank you, everybody, and have a great afternoon.